Chairman, thank you. Members may recall the site from a committee meeting back in November last year, where consideration was given, planning permission was granted for a solar farm consisting of photovoltaic panels on the site. The site is it comprises the site of a former agricultural, former commercial nursery, and you'll see from this site plan here the site coverage as it exists today, with the glass houses and various other buildings associated with the site's former use as a nursery still on the site, and I'll show you some photographs in a minute. Planning permission is sought in outline form, with all matters reserved, for 8 detached houses. The site layout on the screen at the moment is purely illustrative, bearing in mind this is an outline application only. However, it does show how the site could be laid out to provide that quantum of development with access onto Brook Avenue. Chairman, because it's an outline application, I don't have any elevation drawings or floor plans or any other detailed drawings to show you, so we'll skip straight to the photographs, and I'll show you the site's context as it was when these photographs were taken. These photographs are actually a little bit dated from the end of last year, however the general context is, as I understand it, unchanged. This photograph is taken on Brook Avenue itself, looking towards the application site. You'll see in the foreground here we've got the hedgerow which runs along most of the frontage of the site, and behind that the redundant glass houses as they stand at the moment. This is the adjacent, this is the front garden of the adjacent residential property on the right hand side of the photograph. This photograph is also quite useful in that it shows you the overall condition and overall width of Brook Avenue itself, and then in the background here you can see houses adjacent at Yorkdale. This photograph is taken looking over the boundary hedge, and it gives you an idea as to the condition and the overall appearance of the glass houses as they are now. The existing entrance to the site, the gated entrance to the site, in its southwestern corner, and then the reverse view of the first photograph that I showed you, looking back down along Brook Avenue with the application site on the left. Chairman, the application site is on land that's located entirely outside of the defined urban settlement boundary, where an in-principle objection exists to any new residential development. And this in-principle policy objection weighs heavily, and officers consider that any benefits from redeveloping the site and clearing the existing buildings and glass houses are outweighed by the harm caused by development of this sort in the countryside. You will note, Chairman, that there's an update to the committee report which covers a few additional representations that have been received, and also the ecology matters. The upshot of the ecology appraisal effectively is that a fourth reason for refusal is recommended to you today in regards to insufficient information to do with dormice. In effect, however, it is the first reason for refusal which is the overriding concern of officers, and the subsequent reasons for refusal B, C and D could clearly be addressed by the applicant in terms of providing further information or an agreement, or entering into a Section 106 agreement to provide the required financial contributions towards affordable housing and the solar recreation mitigation project. Chairman, we're quite happy to take any questions after you've heard from the deputies.
Thank you. Chairman. It's accepted that this site is outside the settlement boundary, and the main reason the scheme is being recommended for refusal. I'd like to suggest that there are good reasons why the planning authority should look at this differently. The site is a basically derelict site, not just greenhouses but also warehouse buildings and packing sheds. It's an eyesore, and it'll be expensive to remediate without a viable development proposal. Council has approved other developments in the road to address the issue of derelict sites immediately adjacent at Yorkdale and at Kylie Nursery. They're not dissimilar, as argued in the planning officer's report. The report actually suggests that when Yorkdale was approved, the issue of precedent was not relevant, as adjoining derelict sites could be easily restored. Well, that's not accepted. The fact is that a lot of the site is covered by concrete. There are substantial buildings there. There's contamination, which has been confirmed by, potential contamination confirmed by the EHO. Redevelopment of the site would enhance the visual appearance of the area and provide better views through the site to the countryside beyond. The houses will be set back from the road. The site is different from other derelict glass houses in the area. A few examples which show the same proximity to existing dwellings. It's broadly a residential area and which are visible from public areas. This site's immediately adjacent to the highway and is highly visible. The question comes up of the 5-year land supply. Officers have suggested that there's 5.4 years. Well, that's as may be, but that's not actually significantly above the 5-year land requirement, and a lot of that is dependent on Wellborn coming forward. It's proposed that it's going to come forward 2019-20. You'll know the likelihood of that and the difficulty the council may have in terms of meeting the 5-year land supply. In my view, it makes sense for sustainable development proposals in the interim to be approved. There's also a significant level of local support for the proposal, which shouldn't be ignored. We did have an exhibition on site and there was preference for residential development to the approved solar farm. The issue, there was a late ecology response. We haven't had time to address that, but what I would say is there is an existing access to the site from Brook Avenue which could be utilised. Alternatively, as was suggested, we could provide that information. In my view, you would be able to approve the principle of this scheme subject to those issues being resolved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Mr. White on the same scheme.
Thank you. I have some photographs, but I'm not sure what to do with them. I've got one between two, I'm afraid. They're all the same. I can just pass them down. I'm representing the agreed views of 24 people, of whom 23 are frontages in Brook Avenue. All object to this application. We support the report by the planning officer. The site is greenfield, designated outside the defined urban settlement boundaries and within the countryside and the lower Hamble area of special landscape character. The relevant policies to support this application are claimed by the applicant to be CS6, CS9, CS14 and policy DS7 to 9. The application is contrary to CS6, the site is not in an urban area. As former agricultural land, it is excluded from the definition of previously developed land and cannot be considered brownfield as suggested in the application. The application refers to CS9, development in the Western Wards and Whiteley. However, this development does not protect the setting and the natural historical biodiversity and should therefore be disregarded. The proposal is contrary to CS14, development outside settlements not being essential for agriculture, forestry, horticulture and required infrastructure. Therefore, development cannot be considered under CS14. The proposal does not meet any of the exceptional circumstances in section DSP 7 of the 2015 Fareham Local Plan Part 2. This site does not comprise permanent and substantial buildings and already has an alternative use as its permission for a solar farm. As such, the development cannot be considered under DSP 7. Sections DSP 8 and 9 do not apply, as the applicant suggests. The applicant says it cannot be disputed that the redundant buildings are detrimental to the landscape of the area. We agree and believe action should be taken by the Council under Section 215 of the Town and Country Planning Act, which says councils can require land, including buildings, to be cleaned up when its condition adversely affects the amenity of the area. Alternatively, the hedge could be allowed to grow back to its original height of 2 metres and the site would be barely visible from the road. The applicant brings into question the Council's 5-year housing land supply in Section 4 of the application and refers to a Pilry land adjacent to the Navigator. At a March 2016 planning meeting, the Council confirmed it has adequate sites to meet its 5-year housing objective. Also, that site directly fronts the A27 road in a build-up area. No comparisons can be drawn to this greenfield site located on a private roadway away from all settlement boundaries. Reference is made to Courts Reach in Brook Avenue. The same applicant in 2008 said that Courts Reach, if approved, would provide a defendable settlement boundary. We agree with the applicant that it should. Unlike Courts Reach, this site is not adjacent to any urban boundary. I now wish to address the issues of the road. We note with some surprise that the Highway and Planning Officer's reports refer to Brook Avenue as being a wide tarmac private street, but we would refer you to the photographs provided. It is not of a standard considered to be adoptable. It has no footway provision, poor lighting and a dangerous pinch point at its junction with Brook Lane. 100 metres to the west of the proposed development site, it becomes an unsurfaced country lane and is virtually impossible to normal cars. The officer's report refers to harm being caused to this countryside location if development is approved. We strongly agree, as we see families with children, horse riders, dog walkers and other pedestrians using this current pleasant countryside lane to access the Bridleway, Hollyhill Park and the Hamble Riverside. The report also suggests that the development would not have a materially harmful effect on the safety of highway users. As the people who experience this road every day of our lives, we disagree. The frontagers have a liability to provide a safe and secure access for public when using this established right-of-way to access Hollyhill or the Hamble foreshore. In the last 15 years, the number of residential properties has increased from 27 to 41, an increase of more than 50%. But there has been a directly attributable increase of over 200% in traffic movements, up from 100 to 300 a day. With the proposed development, the frontagers and pedestrians can expect another 110 movements a day, a further increase of 36%. Existing resident safety is an issue. The police recognise the safety implications for the 26 families in the eastern section of Brook Avenue who have no visibility displays or pavement to facilitate the safe pedestrian or vehicle egress from their properties. Notwithstanding the more rapid depreciation of the frontage's investment in road surfacing, further intensification of the Brook Avenue will have a detrimental effect upon the existing residents of this private unadopted byway. It is the cumulative effect of continuing development that matters here. To conclude, the application, once the unsupportable claims and assertions are removed, appears to rely heavily from both the applicants and supporters, most of whom do not live in the road, that as the site is derelict, houses will be better for the environment and the area. This argument is attractively misleading. This application is against planning policy and would result in less countryside, more traffic for current residents, and would open a door to further development, eroding the well thought out plan for development across the borough. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Well, yeah, I think it's at this point you might like to explain or clarify the council's policy position on this application.
Yes, quite clearly it's contrary to the existing adopted plan. The site falls outside the settlement boundary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The proposal itself, Mr. Chairman, is actually quite attractive, and it may well be that there are aspects that are more appealing than the agreed solar farm. However, the housing proposal is a permanent element with some local community adverse impacts. Adverse impacts that, in a full planning point of view, may not be able to be totally taken into account, but nevertheless there are adverse impacts. Whereas the solar farm has limited life and no obvious local community impacts. We have to consider this application in the context of our existing borough plan policies, as listed in the recommendation to refuse. And most of those policies, of course, were relatively recently adopted. And I believe that these policies are sensible and they are important in terms of us maintaining control of what is built outside the agreed urban area. We have and we can support to show that we do have a 5-year housing land supply. We are in the process of updating our borough plan, as everyone is aware, and part of that will consider any new sites which are put forward by applicants in terms of meeting our projected future housing needs. But that is not a necessity at this point in time. So I would urge members to go along with the officer's recommendation. This application is contrary to the policies, and the whole raft of them are listed off there, and refuse this application.
Thank you, Chairman. I think probably Councillor Evans has said a lot of the things I wanted to say, actually, but I mean, it is a difficult one. I mean, to my way of thinking, yes, it looks quite attractive to what's there at the moment. You've got Courtbridge on one side, you've got Yorkdale on the other side. And I guess, you know, one has to think about, yes, there's a solar farm there at the present moment. In the future, who knows what that site will be. We could be talking about a lot more houses rather than 8 houses, perhaps. But, you know, I've met a number of residents, both, you know, actually in the road, who object to it. I've attended residents' meetings with them. I've also met residents who are very much in favour of it. And, you know, it's one of these sort of difficult decisions, I think, at the end of the day. And I guess I've got to go along with what Councillor Evans has said, that currently we know we've got probably another 4 outline applications coming in on nursery sites around Warsash, and I guess one can't set precedents in that way. But I've got to say, I do quite like the proposal, but I think we're somewhat stuck, to be perfectly honest. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think if we're going to engage in any planning process in the boroughs, and once we've developed a plan, we've got to stick to it until such times as that's revised. No doubt there will be reasons to revise our borough plan. In fact, that's likely to be done sooner rather than later. And maybe then, sites such as this will be welcomed and brought forward at the appropriate time. I think that future planning, as has happened to the previous plan, will be brought forward on a systematic and rational basis, and not allow those developers who are more prepared and more ready to jump the gun before their policy has been properly developed, for the benefit of everyone in the borough.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to repeat, really, I think what's already been said. I agree that it's scruffy. There's no question this is a scruffy area and it needs tidying up somehow. It is in some ways an attractive development. Some large detached houses, spaciously set out, so there is a certain attraction against what it is now. However, I believe that the developments at either end, Yorkdale and Courts Reach, were brownfield, previously developed land, so it's probably different to that. And I share Councillor Cartwright's concern that the continuation, this starts at Holly Hill at the back there, the countryside area, runs through here and goes across Brook Lane to land south of the Peters Road development, either side of Greenaway Lane and to the north of Warsash Road. And that is just subject currently to a whole raft of consultations, and my concern is at the moment is the precedent, that if this was allowed, the precedent has been set that we're allowing development in what is the countryside. So on that basis I think we have to go with our current policy, and it may be, as Councillor Mandry said, that it's just jumping the gun a bit, that perhaps as the borough plan takes shape we may be looking for further development, but that's for tomorrow, I guess. So I think that we do have to stick with the borough plan and the reasons put forward for refusal.
Any other member?
Mr Chair, I would agree with the upholding of the policy to protect the countryside from the development, and that is our plan of record, and that should be a principal factor in our decision today. The area does look scruffy, and if it is possible to allow the hedge to grow with a tactical measure in the short term, that might be a useful thing to consider.
Yeah, I think we've got to be very careful, and two members have spoken about scruffy. There's a great danger if we have a countryside location and a use, an existing use that is consistent with the countryside location, such as horticulture, agriculture or horticulture. If those existing users let the site become derelict, that does not constitute a reason for allowing houses to be built. That's the point, I think. And certainly one of the deputies seemed to imply, because this site had been allowed to become derelict, therefore we must build houses on it. So I support what I think it was Councillor Evans and Councillor Ford and others have said, that a countryside location. I'm interested, in fact, in the other deputy talking about the use of Section 215 to clear up derelict countryside buildings.
I suppose everybody's had the same. So we've got an officer recommendation for refusal and require a proposer and a second. Proposed by Councillor Evans, seconded by Councillor Baker. Those in favour, please show. It's unanimous. Refusal.